Welcome to VNA Health Highlights, a program of the Visiting Nurse Association of Cape Cod. I'm Jean Sarnowski, and on today's program we're going to learn a little bit more about the bereavement services offered through the VNA's hospice program. And we're lucky enough to have with us today Rick Bickford, who is one of the bereavement counselors for the Visiting Nurse Association. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Taking that extra time.
Sure, my
So
pleasure.
tell us a little bit, I mean, this is a unique field that you're in. So what drew you into this in the beginning, and how long have you been involved?
Well, I kind of came in through the back door, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've been a social worker my whole life, and I was doing a lot of grief work, although not in relation to a hospice program. And living on the Cape and not wanting to commute to Boston anymore.
Yeah.
So I was looking for a job here and saw a job for a bereavement coordinator for a newly formed hospice program with the VNA back in 2001.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I don't know, hospice, but I'll give this a try. And maybe I'll stick with it for a year or two and look for something else. And here I am 13 years later.
Yes, and he's still here.
Yes.
But you were doing some grief counseling before. Was that just sort of the standard mix of the social work that you were doing, or were you specific to grief?
But I was also doing a lot of work in relation to critical incident stress debriefings in the workplace. If there's a catastrophic event at work, like a homicide or a suicide or accident where there was serious injury and death.
Oh, wow.
And we'd go into the workplace and do debriefing groups. And of course, that's a field that back in the mid-'80s when we started, we had no idea that it was going to turn into what it's now turned into.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Because there's been so much
Because there's so much of it. And
more in the world.
Yeah, it's really...
So some of the things that we see on the news today, some of the school shootings and that, you would have been part of that team that goes in.
Yeah. So.
There's more of it.
Yeah. But again, back then we weren't dealing with schools and the kind of stuff that's going on really not that long down the road.
Right.
So
you were certainly, you had a taste of it anyway when you came into the hospice program.
Yeah, and I thought I had a pretty good understanding of grief and the grief response and how it works and so forth. But working in the hospice field has been an entirely new experience.
Really?
And, exposed me to a very different and in many ways new understanding of grief and bereavement and the process of grief.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start just a little bit, just so viewers have a handle on just hospice in general. I know there's still a lot of thinking out there that hospice is a place.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if you wanted to clear that up a little bit.
Yeah, that's a lot of people do have the idea that it's a place that you go to, or that hospice sort of moves into your home and is there, 24/7. And although there are hospice facilities, hospice houses, where people do go at the very end of their lives, the VNA does not have a hospice house. And we are pretty much home care, so we go into people's homes and with a team of hospice professionals. But there's a lot of working with the families to provide much of the care under the supervision of the team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hospice can be provided, I mean, home has a different definition for people.
Yes.
So it can be my house on the corner of the street,
Right.
or I could be in a independent living. You could still come see me there.
Yes. Yep. Nursing home, independent living, rest homes.
All right. Assisted livings, any of those places, wherever you call home.
Yes.
The service is still available.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you talked about the whole team of people, what kind of team is involved? It's not just a nursing service.
Correct. There's an entire team of hospice professionals that work together to provide a constellation of services, and that includes the nursing service. We have a medical director, and
So that's somebody that oversees everything.
Yes.
Make sure everything's in order as it should be with regulations and some of that, or?
Yeah, with regulations and to advise around medication-related issues and.
Oh, so that's a physician. The medical director is a
Yeah,
physician.
the medical director
position.
is a physician.
Okay.
We have two. We're sort of divided into east and west teams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
So you have the Falmouth end and the
sort
Hyannis
of
east
yes,
side.
yeah.
Okay.
Dennis, Yarmouth, and down.
Okay.
And yeah, we meet as a team every 2 weeks, and we go over people that are coming into the program, people that have recently died, and people that are in ongoing care, and discuss situations and nuances and cases
yeah.
and so forth. Yeah.
So the team, so you have nurses. I'm sorry, I cut you off. So it's
Yeah,
medical
no.
directors.
We have a medical director, we have nurses,
Yep.
we have home health aides, we have social workers, we have volunteers, and then we have bereavement support counselors.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that bereavement support and spiritual part of the same?
And spiritual, I'm sorry.
Or is
I
that
didn't
something they're
mention.
separate, right?
Separate, although there's an awful lot of overlap in the two areas. But spiritual, our spiritual counselors are both people that are ordained ministers and have more of a clerical background.
Okay. So they're not ordained in any specific religion. They're ordained and they know a little bit about everything.
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not as though you, if you're a patient on the hospice program, have to believe in anything, any kind of religion. Actually,
Oh, yeah.
It can be it's just sort of supportive spiritual counseling.
Okay.
A lot of people these days really are not, may have been brought up with a certain religion, but have grown away from that, but have a lot of spiritual beliefs and feelings, and so it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So the spiritual counselors are trained in all of those things,
Yes.
so they can relate to anybody.
Yeah.
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 Now, your specialty is the bereavement side.
Yes. Yes.
Now, does the word bereavement, does everybody understand what that means? I wonder.
Well, bereavement is really a reference to a sort of normal and natural reaction and response that we all have to loss, and in our case, to the loss of a relationship, of somebody that is loved and means a lot to death. So it refers to the sort of feelings and thoughts and behaviors that that go along with that reaction and response that we all have. Yeah.
I like your opening line was the natural and sort
Normal
of
and
normal.
yeah.
Do people feel that way when they go through it? Are they feeling like?
Well, it can feel very much. It can often, for many people, feel not normal at all.
Really?
Yeah. Sometimes it can be very disconcerting to the point of people feeling as though they're going crazy, or they've lost their
really?
marbles, or
Yeah.
they don't know which end is up.
Right.
And that's not at all unusual when you think about the impact of what this event has on your life.
Right.
But people often, it's helpful for people often to sort of hear that, no, this is really a normal, natural response, and it's very typical, and it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the questions we had was, what does bereavement feel like?
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
That's almost an impossible question to answer.
Is it? It must be so different for everybody.
Well,
And maybe that's what
it.
this is.
Yeah, it's grief is an extremely personal and private matter, really, and it's really also unique to the relationship that you had with this person that you've lost to death, and so the response is very much an individual response, but you know, it can, and I think for probably most people, it does sort of begin with what's really a devastating event in their lives. But it's really important to say also that some people don't experience it that way, and that doesn't mean, sometimes people worry that, you know, they're not.
How come I don't feel as bad as I think I should?
Falling apart, or crying all the time, or, you know, or having a more difficult time than I'm having. And it's just people grieve in their own styles, in their own way, and it can be very different from one person to the next.
I would imagine even for an individual, it may be different if they've experienced grief in the past with someone else, that even their own grief might be different with a different loss.
Well, yeah, and you think sometimes it's tempting to think, oh, well, you know, somebody's been through this, so it's not going to be as bad, and come to find out that in fact it can be worse. Or it has a way because of
you do know how bad it is.
Yeah, it has a way also sometimes of sort of you think that you've kind of reconciled yourself to, you know, a previous loss, and you're doing better and you're going okay, and it's sort of, you know, you found a place for it, and then, you know, you experience this new loss, and it has a way of sort of bringing up
the
things all over again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so it's really not a matter of, you know, how often or how, hopefully, most people won't have to have that kind of experience.
I know.
But people do have multiple losses in their lives. So.
Do you find, as someone in the industry and that deals with so many people, is there, you know, I can't imagine, I don't even want to say it, but is there a standard? I'm thinking of people that maybe are watching that are feeling like, what are the top 5 things that are normal in your mind? I mean, is it normal that, what do you see? Does everybody, oh yeah, everybody goes through blah, everybody goes through blah. Can you share any of that? Or is it so unique that?
Oh no, well I think it's, you know, I think it's fairly typical for the most part, and safe to say that for most people, first of all, there's really no preparation for the moment of death.
Yeah.
Whether it's a sudden death, and completely unexpected, or whether somebody's been taking care of somebody for 6 years, and then. So
even though it's imminent, you know it's coming, when the moment comes, it's completely different than
really,
knowing about it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can make it a little easier if you've, you know, you're anticipating the loss for a while and somewhat prepared in that sense.
Yeah.
But again, once it's like a light switch. When somebody dies, it's like, you know, the door to whatever your life was prior to that moment is slammed shut, and you're in a brand new place. It's really, and often a place that's filled initially with tremendous pain and sorrow and confusion, and so it can be really, really hard, especially early on. So there really is sort of this initial phase of grief that has to do with disbelief and denial and shock and just feeling like you're sort of a deer in the headlights.
Yeah.
And that can go on for a little while.
What's a little while?
Again, I think anywhere from, for a lot of folks, that really raw sort of difficult period can last for a couple of weeks, up to 3 months, sometimes longer. Yeah. And that's where you're really sort of just, you know, you are really in grief. I mean, you can't sort of get away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do you tell people at that point?
Well,
how do you guide them through that this too shall pass, and
well,
this,
it's
everybody has this feeling, and what's the comfort that comes with?
Yeah, it's really it's an important sort of characteristic, I think, of grief, that it's sort of a contradiction. That as painful as it is, people don't really want it fixed. I mean, they don't want it. I've found sort of over the years doing this stuff that people are extremely protective of their grief. And it may be that the grief itself, you know, is sort of the most powerful emotional connection that they have to this person.
Oh, yeah.
And that's true initially, and it's also true down the road. And so it's very, very important for people to acknowledge, for other people to acknowledge what has happened to somebody. But they don't, they're not looking for advice, they're not looking to have, have it fixed.
You
It
have
is
to go
helpful.
through it,
Yeah.
not around it, not over it.
Yeah,
It has
yeah.
to have to go through it.
Yeah. But it's very, very helpful for people to just know that other people are concerned and caring and aware and you know, interested in providing support.
Yeah.
So as people are sort of moving through this initial phase, we try to emphasize those kinds of things.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So what kind of services then does the VNA offer through their bereavement programs?
Well, we have our bereavement program is organized really around providing services for at least the first 13 months following a loss.
That seems like a long time. Is that
pretty
standard?
Yeah. I think the services are sort of several tiers.
Okay.
We send out sympathy cards. We make follow-up phone contacts with people. And we send out mailings, and then if people are interested, we have individual counseling as well as support groups available. But it's 13 months, but you know, we usually wait, unless there's a specific reason, we usually wait about 4 to 6 weeks before we make an initial phone call.
Okay.
Again, because we found that many people just need to sort of be with where they are for a little while.
Process that feeling.
Yeah, and they're not ready. They are not ready to. Again, it's not across the board, but
no, but that's sort of the general what you see.
Yeah.
And then what? You have support groups, or you reach out and
yeah.
have
Then
a
when we make
you
these,
do
we
one-on-one
make
if
phone
people want.
calls, and when we make this sort of first round of phone calls, we have lots of people who will make use of, people will respond by saying, well, I think I'm doing okay right now, or I'm not sure how I'm doing, but, and very open to maybe, how about another phone call? You know, you have my number, you can call us anytime, but if we don't hear from you, we'll check back in with you in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or a couple of months.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are very open to that sort of level of support. And we stay in touch with, you know, folks that way. And then it's not unusual for some point down the road, 9 months, even a year out, for people to get to a point where they are in a place where they say, yeah, it might be helpful for a visit, or I'm interested in a support group. I mean, sometimes it happens sooner than that, but it's not unusual for it to be a year out.
Does that align with whatever the stages are, or?
Not really.
Not really.
No.
That's good. Yeah, yeah.
No, I mean, we hear about the stages of grief.
Yeah, what are those? Do you want to just
so we
touch on
go,
those? Yeah.
Well, there may variations of this, but Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she talked about, her study was with people who actually had been informed of having a terminal illness and facing end of life.
Okay.
But she really earmarked the stages of grief with the denial and anger and bargaining and depression and recovery, or, you know, acceptance. So there's a lot of variation on those stages.
For those that are left behind, have all of that denial, or and then
but
anger, I would think, would be a biggie. Yeah.
Yeah, and the temptation is for us to sort of look at that sort of in the popular sense. Culture as structured linear equation, go from A to B to C to D, and it just doesn't work that way at all.
Everybody's so different.
Yeah, and all 5 of those stages can go on in the first week, and they can go on 3 months later, and even a year out, you can be shaking your head saying, this isn't real. I can't. You know. So it's really a cascade of different emotions and thoughts that just sort of come more in waves, and over a period of time, the waves tend to maybe be a little further apart, and they don't tend to be as defined.
Yeah.
They smooth out a little bit, and eventually, you have this initial phase, you have this middle phase that sort of goes on and on and on. You think you're making progress, and then you're in the grocery store, and you go to get a box of cereal, and that's my husband's
your person's favorite cereal, yeah.
And so you can't get out of the store fast enough.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful stuff, isn't it? Yeah.
But then eventually you do get to this point where it's not quite as difficult as it was.
Yep.
And sometimes you can only really see that when you look back at where you were 6
Right.
months earlier.
Right. Does it becomes the new normal? It doesn't exactly ever. Does it ever go away? It just becomes.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. Nor
This is a part of who I am now.
exactly. Yeah. It really becomes. It's sort of an event, an external event that happened out here, and over a period of time, you sort of integrate this event and this terribly difficult thing, sort of into your life, and it becomes kind of part of your own life narrative, really.
Yeah.
And so you kind of reconcile yourself to it, and you go on, and but it never really goes away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's good for people to know that maybe
Yeah.
are thinking or waiting for something to go away. It probably never does. It just becomes
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And well, sometimes people have a real fear that somebody's memory is fading, and they can't.
Oh yeah.
They can't quite remember what their voice sounds like, or
Yeah.
what they look like, or certain things, and that's very upsetting,
Yep.
for people. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So talk a little bit about some of the other services that are offered then through VNA Hospice. So you have the letters and the calls.
Right.
Any of that follow-up goes on for 13 months, but then you touched on support groups a little.
Yes.
Different kinds, different locations.
Yeah, we have a bunch of support groups that meet just sort of as ongoing, kind of open-ended support groups that meet a couple of times a month, and we have those in several locations.
Okay.
And those are available not just to people who are in hospice, but for anybody in the community.
Great.
Really, so yeah. So and then we also try to organize groups that are sort of kind of capture a specific kind of demographic. So if it's a spousal loss issue, it's a group that's for people with spousal loss, adult parents, people with child loss. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so we're
They're tailored to So
yeah.
for people that might be interested in attending one,
right.
they can know that they're not mixed in with people that are completely different, that they're all sharing some of the same suffering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And sometimes that works a little better. Yeah.
Does everybody do a support group?
Oh no,
No.
no,
Oh, no.
no.
It's good for some. It works for some, not for all.
Yeah, I mean we sort of like to believe that that's something that would be helpful for anybody, but the reality is it isn't. Some people get a great amount of benefit out of attending a support group, and some people come once or twice and it's just not right for them, and some people know that's not something they want to try at all. So, but for people who do come, it tends to work really very well. Yeah, yeah.
Especially when it's targeted to a specific loss, I would think that would be helpful.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And those are also groups that tend to be a little more structured. So we'll maybe agree on the front end to do 8 groups or 12 groups over a period of time, and then stop, as opposed to a sort of open-ended, ongoing process. Yeah.
So what do you see, Rick? Then do people then just fall off the page? They disappear, and you know that they're good. Where does your closure come from when you've been so close to a situation or to a loss with a family, and
well, it is.
you know that they're well when you no longer hear from them, or you call and they say, no, everything's great, thank you so much?
That's an interesting question and
Oh,
observation
sorry.
because it's almost as though you're there for a piece of a journey with people, and
A big
when
one.
you're, yeah, a big one.
I mean,
Sometimes,
kind of a serious
yeah,
journey, really. Yeah.
Oh, it is, and it is a journey. It's
Yeah.
really, but it's sort of like once you've sort of completed that piece of this journey with folks, you've served the purpose.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So it's really nice to run into people, sort of after the fact, and there's always a big smile and a
Sure.
hello and how are you doing, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And it's really, from my point of view, it is so rewarding, to see people whose lives have sort of, when we first encounter them, are shattered,
Yeah.
and then to see people
Mended.
a little, a little sadder, maybe a little more wise down the road, but back to living and back to having joy in their lives.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's big.
Yeah.
Wow.
It is.
Any other, we only have a couple minutes left,
Sure.
services that you want to talk about through the bereavement program,
Well, let's see.
or things that people need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we do, we've had periods in the past where we've had children's programs, and we can do that at any point in time. We've utilized farms and working with farm animals and horses, and kids are very, once you distract them, you'll get much more information from them.
Okay.
So we've done workshops and so forth, and we're still open to doing those, but it's really sort of like hitting a moving target. I mean, you have to have enough kids at any one point in time who are available to do that with, and,
Right.
and we don't always. So, but that's something.
Which is probably a good thing.
It is a good
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, it is a good thing.
Yeah.
But it's so easy to sort of underestimate, what kind of grief's
Yeah.
going on in kids, because they don't show it in the same ways
Right.
often. They're not as verbal and so
Yeah.
forth. So we are available all the time to be consulting with parents, grandparents, caregivers about kids and any concerns they have
Okay.
about kids, and go in and meet with kids.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah. So that's an important area.
Okay.
And then I think just available in general to, again, the entire community around issues that come up, related to loss. And there's a lot of it going on
There's
in
a lot of
many
it
different
going on,
forms.
yeah.
So
So your message is to this, you'll
Just-
get through it, everybody gets through it.
Well,
It just becomes a new way of
yeah,
carrying on.
and I think the getting through it can be less difficult with support.
There you go.
And a lot of people feel as though they got to kind of go through this alone,
Yeah.
and figure it out for themselves. And even if you get support, you ultimately are doing that anyhow. So,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rick, for being here and
Well, my pleasure.
sharing your wisdom. That's
Yeah,
good stuff. You do good work. That's
Thank
tough
you.
stuff. Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
And I'm Jean Sarnowski, wishing you good health and good health care.